This is NDTV, and you're watching Classics.
It's a sizzling summer morning here in the interiors of Andhra Pradesh. We're about 150 kilometers outside of Hyderabad in the Narayan Khed village in Medak district. Now, very few of corporate India's head honchos start their day in locales like this. Most of them start their day in swanky gyms or elite clubhouses, but not the man we are talking to today. He's given up the corner office with a view in favor of field visits like this. He's hung up his three-piece suit and taken on the khadi kurta. And most importantly, he's made a profitable business out of lending to India's rural poor. We are in conversation today with Vikram Akula, CEO and founder of SKS Microfinance. Hi Vikram,
How are
Ira,
you?
nice to meet you. Thanks for having us here.
Thank you for coming.
So do you do these field visits often?
I spend about a third of my time in the field,
Right.
in some village in some part of the country or the other.
And what brings you here this morning?
This morning we're doing a what's called a participatory wealth ranking, where we're using highly visual group exercises to get villagers to identify the poorest people in their village.
This is also the first village where you started out. Is this one of your favorite spots for emotional reasons as well?
Sure, and not this village in particular, but this region was where our first branch is. But yes, I know this area very well. I've lived in this region for about 3 years. Many of these villagers, are ones that I've worked with over the period of time. So yes, there's a lot of sentimental, attachment to this area.
Right, we'll let you get started with your day. We'll follow you around and see how SKS Microfinance actually does its business.
Great.
దాని పక్కనే అయ్యుండి దాని గొల్ల భాషలో పక్కనే అయ్యుండి
ఎవరన్నా సంఘంలో ఉన్నారా పాయింట్ చేసి వాళ్ళ పేర్లు చెప్పు మనం టాలీ వీళ్ళెవరు అంటే బక్క వీళ్ళు.
Right, Vikram. Now, what exactly is happening here? It looks like you're mapping out a village. Explain this whole process to us if you can.
Sure. Well, one of the things we know about microfinance is that it doesn't reach the ultra poor, those who are completely destitute, who have no assets. These are widows with a large number of children, the elderly, the disabled, and so on. And so what we've done at SKS is we've started actually a new program to target the ultra poor. Unlike microfinance, where you give someone a loan for, let's say, taking up a buffalo and then selling the milk, in this case they're too poor to take up a loan. So we would actually give them a buffalo or some other asset, train them on how to use the asset for a period of a year to year and a half, and then graduate them into the mainstream microfinance program. So what you see here is the first step of that, which is identifying who the ultra poor are in a village. Now the way in which we do that is you don't want to go into a village and just say who's ultra poor, because everyone will raise their hand. So instead we use a process called participatory wealth ranking. And the idea is to use highly visual group exercises, chalk powder, seeds and stones, to get villagers to talk about what their village looks like. In this case, we're actually mapping all of the households in the village, and then we're having the villagers themselves categorize people into the ultra poor, the very poor, moderate poor, and then the upper poor.
How does this then translate into a lending decision from SKS Microfinance?
Sure. Now, keep in mind that there's two programs that we do. One is the lending program, and the other is the ultra poor program, where we actually provide them assets. This will translate more for that ultra poor program. So we'll be able to identify all of the green households, all of the ultra poor, and then we'll go and do a village household visit with each of them.
Right, we're now in the Sindol village and we're here to see the core operations of SKS Microfinance. This is one of their lending centers where they've done a lot of business. We're going to talk to Vikram Akula about exactly how this lending takes place, the model that they follow, whether it's group lending, whether it's lending to women. Let's get behind all of that. Vikram, now there are a couple of things about your model that are interesting and that have been used other places as well. One of them being that you lend in groups. Explain the logic behind that. How does that work better according to you?
Sure. Well, one of the reasons the banking system has failed the poor is that the poor simply don't have collateral that they can pledge for loans. So because of that, it's too risky for most banks to come in and lend to the poor. What we've done and what most of microfinance institutions have done is use a group lending model where 5 women serve as a guarantor for each other. In that way, even though they don't have physical capital, they have what's called social capital, and that's what's used, and that's the thing against which we lend. And we find that we can give a loan, all of them serve as a guarantor for each other, so if one woman gets into difficulty in a particular week, the others will repay on her behalf for that particular installment.
And it is only to women that you lend, is that, or is that a general benchmark, but you also lend to men? What is?
No, we lend exclusively to women, and we do so for 3 reasons. The first is from a social impact perspective. We know that if we put money in the hands of poor women, that they'll invest it in their household, unlike men who typically spend a little bit for personal consumption before the rest comes to the household. The second, we find that women are better entrepreneurs. They're actually more careful about how they spend money, at least in rural areas, at least among the poor. So they've got a higher success rates for the types of activities that they take up than do the activities that men take up. Chai pienge, PGA. Some aspects about.
What, in your opinion, distinguishes you from money lenders? Is it just the rate, or is it also the... Now we're getting into dangerous territory, but we have to ask.
Not at all.
Is it just the interest rates charged? Is it also, this kind of service you offer? Because at the end of the day, your rates are still very much higher than what you and I would get, say, in urban India. So, what is the difference really?
Sure. So clearly with regard to money lenders, the difference is a couple of things. Number one is we're charging significantly lower rates than money lenders. We also do so without taking collateral.
Since there isn't really potential for rates to come down anywhere beyond this?
Well, there is, as economies of scale happen. We use technology extensively, so in that way you can get more and more efficiencies. So if there wasn't an interest rate hike recently by the RBI, we would have been in a position to lower interest rates. Thank you.
7వ గ్రూప్లో పాషాబి సాదకలి కిరాణా షాప్ గురించి 20,000 రూపాయలు దరఖాస్తు చేసింది 20,000 రూపాయలు శాంక్షన్ అయినాయి మీ గ్రూప్ వాళ్ళందరూ ఒప్పుకుంటారా
Right, Vikram, so you've just given out a 20,050 loan to this lady, basically on the basis of a voice vote from her community. How does that comply with regulation? Isn't that an issue in terms of, you are subject to RBI regulations? How does that work?
Right. So the RBI has no regulations against regulations that say that you have to take collateral. What it doesn't comply with is what is typical conventional banking practice. Typical banking practice says if we're giving a 20,000 rupee loan, we need to understand cash flows, we need to have collateral. What we're saying is that for the poor, you don't need all that. All you simply need to do is to set up a group, and that the group, if they guarantee it on their voice, we're going to give the loan.
In terms of KYC compliance, how do you deal with that?
We comply with all KYC norms. We take photos of borrowers, we take photocopies of various documents that allow us to comply with KYC, and we capture this in our automated management information system. So all that we're able to comply with, and yet provide something that actually works for them. 40 రూపాయలు అసలు 5 రూపాయలు మితి అయితే 5 రూపాయలు 50 వారం కడితే ఎంత అవుతుంది సరే మూసేస్తాం
వారము సంఘ మీటింగు తీసుకున్న అప్పులతో మా కుటుంబాన్ని పైకి తెస్తాం
ఇది 8 గుంపు 8 2 గుంపు 5 గుంపు
Some fairly heated questioning from them about interest rates and why you can't charge low interest rates. Do they understand where you're coming from and what the model is and why the rates can't be lower?
Definitely. I mean, what I did is, certainly they ask about interest rates, but what I did is I simply explained to them, look, this is our cost to run this operation. And I explained to them that we've given out 700 crores and asked them where they think we get the money. They said banks. I told them, what's the interest rate? And they know what the interest rate is at banks. And then I said, here's our cost to come out to deliver that to you. This is the cost of our staff and so on. And I basically said that unless we charge this interest rate, we're not able to deliver this, and it's your choice. We can charge lower interest rate and then close shop, or we could charge the same interest rate and continue to give that credit line.
Okay, now there have been a number of proposals which say that perhaps you can limit interest rates, cap interest rates for MFIs. Are you in favor of that?
We're very clear that if you cap interest rates, you end up limiting access to finance for the poor. Because what happens is if you restrict the amount of interest that you can charge, most microfinance institutions won't be able to sustain that and they end up closing, which means that moneylenders go back to the hands of the loan sharks. By capping interest rates, we're putting borrowers back into the hands of loan sharks, and it's the single worst thing that you can do if you're trying to increase access to finance. Who wants what?
We've got a fascinating insight into SKS Microfinance's ground operation. It's time to talk strategy and business now. How do you take this model? How do you scale it up? How do you ensure that it remains profitable? And where do you get the capital to do all that from? We'll get to all of that, but first we need to take a pit stop. We're starving, so is Vikram Akula. It's time for lunch.
Come. Kucho, baitiye. Come. We'll do something. Like, if you did the economic piece, they know anything. He said, get out there, get out to Indian villages, understand